Hello everyone, it's me, Clayton. I just got back from watching Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, based on the collection of short stories of the same name by Alvin Schwartz, and with a lot of involvement from Guillermo del Toro, though he did not direct it. So, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, as a series of short horror stories, essentially became a cultural phenomenon in the 80s and 90s, mainly due to their excellent artwork, creepy scenarios, and the controversies they drove from various schools who had the books. So this film adaptation is sort of like Goosebumps for big kids, in the sense that it takes several short stories from the series and some of the most popular and more famous scary monsters and puts them all into this one film with a story connecting them all. But let's get to the story, shall we? The story is about a group of kids, Stella, Chucky, August, and Ramon, who happen to discover a haunted mansion that has a spooky backstory about a woman named Sarah who was tortured and who was basically treated as a local boogie woman who would tell kids scary stories that would lead to their untimely deaths. When Stella ends up discovering a book that's there, the various scary stories come to life and attack those who were involved in that night, and the kids have to find out how to stop these scary stories from killing everyone they know and love, and even some that they don't love, before Sarah's revenge ultimately takes hold. So the story presented here is actually a pretty clever way of connecting the stories together. It doesn't involve the actual author of the stories like Goosebumps did with R.L. Stine, but I still think it's a good way to connect the stories together into a cohesive horror film. And, as you'd expect from this kind of film, a lot of the more famous monsters are here and have their original creepy designs. They translate pretty well to film, such as the pale woman with the creepy face. She makes a really good appearance. The walking scarecrow is disturbingly creepy in its lack of movement as well as the sounds it makes. But easily the creepiest has to be the Jangly Man. Mainly with his extremely deep voice and the way his body contorts. Let's just say the trailers are only a taste of what's to come. The characters involved are pretty standard for this kind of film, though. Another similarity it has with Goosebumps. I think they're more charismatic and therefore funnier than the characters from Goosebumps, but they still fall into a bunch of cliches, like the awkward comic relief, the main hero girl, the outcast boy, the generic bullies, you name it. Yeah, and honestly, there are some parts of the film that do feel a little awkwardly written, like certain stories connect to certain fears the kids had in the past, and some stories tend to write themselves without too much of an explanation, or at least not as much as you would like for how it happens, or how a certain someone knows every single person's fears. But I could say that for a lot of horror films of this type. So, despite the fact that I felt the script was a little bit weak, especially with the comic relief and some of the plot points, the film does work as a straight-up horror film. The visual effects for the monsters are extremely creepy. I actually think the CGI is used pretty well. The music is perfect, with enough suspense and a lot of dramatic flourishes for the more gory scenarios. And I do think that the main actors, especially the ones who played Stella and Ramon, do a really good job with their roles. Even if they are given cliched material to work with, they still work with it the best they can, which I can appreciate. I definitely don't think it'll be a classic horror film. Then again, Goosebumps wasn't really either. And I don't think it should get a sequel, even though it is something they kind of hint at before the credits. But on its own, I do think it's a solid horror film that pays a proper tribute to these stories. So I'll give Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark a 7.5 out of 10. See you next time.